The moment I became a mom, I knew something was wrong. My whole life had become the very thing I wanted to protect my daughter from. This is a story about breaking generational curses. Welcome back to All Things Healing Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about breaking generational curses. And to break generational curses means to end toxic patterns that haunt your family's history. It means to break away from negative expectations placed or assigned to you by birth, like, just growing up, things that you've overheard, things that you've been taught, things that have been said to you. Ending family generational curses, meaning to actually take a step back and address the trauma that has been dealt or passed down to you. And sometimes we don't know that they're passed down to us. And you do have to become self-aware of your surroundings, of the things that you are creating. So yes, a lot of us are born with generational curses, but a lot of times people feel like they can't break generational curses, and you can break them. It all starts with you. You have to become self-aware. And for me, my awareness actually cut on through the birth of my first daughter. When I actually got pregnant, I was 19 years old. Okay. To me, like thinking about my daughter, my first daughter, she's 11 now, but thinking about her being 19, and even like we've already had discussions, and she's like, hey mom, I'm probably going to live with you until I'm like 22. And me, like, I want that for her, because thinking back at it at age 18, 19, even 20, your kids, to me, they're still kids. Even though legally they're not, like they can do certain things at the age of 18, I feel like the mind is not completely developed. Of course, like, that's facts. The mind is not completely developed. So that's why the age 21 thing is like, oh, you can't drink until you're 21. And when I became pregnant at the age of 19, first I actually hid it from my mom. And for a couple of months, I did not tell her that I was pregnant. I actually waited until I remember taking pregnancy tests and actually hiding them under my bed. And I don't know why I did that. That's so weird. Because now I think back at it, it actually had like urine on it. So that's kind of weird. But I hid all my pregnancy tests under the bed because for me, I actually didn't want to acknowledge that I was actually pregnant, because I literally was feeling like I was going to go through this pregnancy and no one would probably know that I was pregnant, or that I can hide it. I was going to just wear like bigger clothes, or there was just so much emotions like running through me. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't figured out life right now. Like, I don't know. And I remember one day my mom came home and we got into like a heated argument, and she was like, oh, today I got a ticket in your name. And I had never got a ticket or anything, but she used my name to get a ticket. And so in response to that, I was like, oh, well, guess what? I'm pregnant. And so just even how that came out was like, it was a hidden thing because my mom hid her pregnancy from her mom. So it was a lot of like emotions, I think, that I was actually feeling. But during my pregnancy was, a lot of emotions, which I'll probably tell another time. But when I actually went into labor with my daughter and gave birth to her, it literally clicked on that I was like a mom, like instantly, like right when I seen her, I was like, oh my God, like this is like the purest form of love. I instantly thought, like, I have to protect her. Like, that's what I actually thought giving birth to her to grow up different. Like, and it's crazy as it sounds, but during my pregnancy, I actually did not think of any of these things. I didn't even think of the future for us. I didn't think like what kind of mom I wanted to be. I was just like pregnant, going along with the flow. But the moment my daughter came out, I literally was like, I have to protect her and I have to grow up. And I wanted to give her the best of me and who I was. So instantly, I wanted to go into that mode of protection for her. And I remember when I had brung her home, it was like so severe of me wanting to protect her that I actually didn't want anyone to actually hold her either. I didn't want anyone to hold her. I remember like I told everyone like she's off limits, like don't touch her. And I didn't actually understand why I was doing that. I didn't understand like the whole concept of postpartum, which they play the video in there, but I guess that is part of it. But for me, it was more of like a protection thing because I felt like I didn't want anyone to hurt her the way I was hurt as a child. And her being a girl was like seeing myself all over again. Like, oh my God, I'm a mom and I have a chance to do this thing different. I have a chance to change the dynamic. I have a chance to break generational curses. I have a chance to love this little girl unconditionally, but not only that, but also give her the best form of love through the way I seen her, so innocent, so pure. And it wasn't until like, I brung her home that I realized that my whole life was so chaotic. And it was like something I was like, I gotta, do better for me and this, baby. I told myself, for one, that I made a promise to myself. And this is what I'm talking about, breaking the, generational curses, that it starts with you. And I told myself, I'm not gonna, spank my daughter every time I'm upset. A lot of people feel like it's a weird thing because some people feel like, corporal punishment for children is okay. It actually causes a lot of issues for children, but it's the physical abuse of a child. And when you're talking about physical abuse and you're talking about, emotionally or verbally or any of that type of thing being done to a child, like I said, when a kid is born, they're innocent. They don't know any better. So as me having this little girl, I understood in my sense, like she's actually gonna make mistakes. She's gonna probably dirty the house. She's going to kind of make me frustrated at times just because as a parent you do become so overwhelmed, but it's like how we handle those things and in return, because to be honest with you guys, no one asks us to be here. Like, you listening, you probably didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be here, but we're here. I promised and vowed to myself that I would actually give her love unconditionally through the way that I wasn't loved, the way that I viewed parenting, the way that I was treated, the way that my siblings were treated. I was like, I'm going to do this whole thing a 360. I remember also being a mom now, I was able to actually realize that a lot of things that was going on in my life as a child should have never happened. And at the time, there is still some issues going on. And I would actually use this, my daughter, as an example on why that was wrong. And I feel like that's where the self-awareness comes from. Breaking generational curses, you have to have self-awareness to understand that you have to sometimes take yourself out of the right or wrong situation and look at it and say, is that really right? Is that wrong? And so having those discussions were actually really, really tough for my mom. It was really tough for her. We've had many of discussions about it, and I feel like it's a curse because most of the time, a lot of parents actually are passing down the curse. You're passing down a curse down to your children, and they've got it from their mom and their dad. And so some of the times that's all they were taught, and that's all they know. So it's about you opening that awareness and then coming to the front line. And for me, I was that kid. And I also was the only one that had kids first. My daughter was able to open up a different part of me that I didn't even know that exist. And I probably wouldn't have known that certain things weren't right until I had my daughter. Because there were a lot of things that were done that I just could never, ever imagine putting my daughter through. That I couldn't imagine, calling my daughter certain names, I couldn't imagine doing, how do I say this? Doing very things that to a child that just is just unimaginable. I couldn't imagine doing that to my daughter. I couldn't imagine. And these are the reasons why I'm saying breaking generational curses. If you are a parent or you're going to become a parent, then you definitely for sure can change the cycle. But it all starts with you and looking at your children or looking at someone else or also speaking up for someone else in the family. And I remember when I had my daughter, I did that a lot with my younger siblings. I would use that as an example to say, could you imagine if I did that to her? Oh, no, you can't. So why are you doing that to them? When you want to break generational curses, you also do have to speak up. And sometimes that makes that you become the villain in the family or you become the outcast of the family. You have to be able to take that on and understand that that is the consequence to breaking generational curses. Because we don't want to speak up. A lot of people don't want to speak up. They go through this whole thing, this whole trauma, and they say, oh, well, it is what it is. But then they continue with their kids and so on and so on. So when you have that one person in the family that's like, no, actually, this is not right. Actually, this is what happened to me. And I feel that a lot for some of my family members. I feel that a lot because once I had my daughter, like it literally was like a hero because I'm going to speak up for, my siblings or I'm going to speak up for myself. So this can stop and this can end here because if I didn't speak up, these things were going to continue with my sibling if they had kids, so that they know, hey, this wasn't right that was done to us. And, some people either can take that and say, you're right. And then some people can fight against it and feel like, no, it was right. We should have got beat. It's always a different way to do different things. If you're a person who has experienced, trauma or grew up in a household of abuse, neglect, or, grew up in ways that weren't your fault, because none of it is your fault. You don't choose your parents. We don't choose our parents. We don't decide who we come into this life with. We're given these parents for a reason, but it is our duty to change the narrative of our storyline. It is our duty to change the narrative of our family. If you know how you felt as a child, and I remember how I felt as a child. I remember all those feelings, and I didn't want those feelings to be of my daughter, both of my daughters. And I didn't want those feelings to cause them to eventually hate me, because most of the time that's what it does, is that it turns into hate for that person. That's not a place that is a good place to be for anyone. The moment when I did bring my daughter home, I had a C-section. I was still living at my mom's. I was now 20 because I got pregnant at 19, and I had her a month after my 20th birthday. And I'm healing because of the C-section. And with healing, it was so hard for me to even get up out the bed, even the hospital. I think they were like forcing me to get up and walk like I would say 2 days, but it was just so hard for me. So it made me stay in there a little bit longer than we should have, but it was good because that kind of gave me a little mental break from reality. Once I got home, I remember my mom was so upset with me because I didn't let her hold my daughter. Like I said, it wasn't only for her, it was for everyone. But again, I don't know why I felt those ways until later on I found out I was postpartum. But it was like a fear of mine. And so I'm like, no, I don't want you to hold her. I don't want anyone to hold her. But we lived in the same house. And I remember I went into my brother's room and was talking to my brothers. And I'm like, hey, bring my baby. And they were in high school at the time, So I'm like I said, I'm the oldest of 7. So I'm like in there and I'm the only one with the kid. Hey, what you guys doing? Asking my brothers how was school and stuff. And my mom comes in the door and she's like, let me hold her. Let me hold her. And I'm like, no, I don't want anyone to touch her. Boom. It was a fight. It was like, I'm sitting here with my baby who's a newborn, and we just started fighting. I would say I was attacked because I was healing from stitches. So I'm like, I can't even defend myself. And I remember that was like this is not something that I want to be doing with my daughter. I never will fight my daughter. I couldn't imagine doing this to my daughter instead of loving her and like, oh, okay, babe, I understand, there's just at that moment, I was like, I took that moment as in, I would do this different. I would definitely do this different. I would definitely console my daughter to figure out, we wouldn't even be there at that point, but I'm just saying, I would definitely have done that different. And that moment for me was so like hurtful and devastating. Because I was holding my daughter and I'm like, try not to get hit. And then my brothers jumped in. They're like, no, let's not fight. Stop hitting her. And they're telling my mom, sis, get out the room. And I remember my kid's dad came in there. He grabbed my daughter. And I had no choice but to fight my mom. And I didn't want to fight her, but this was like so normal in my family that that's what was like our love language with each other. And it was like fight or flight, So after that moment, I was like, I had left the house with my daughter and her dad, and we went to stay with his parents. But at that moment, I was like, I'm never gonna be that person. I never want to place my hands and physically box my daughter. And at that moment was the moment where I was like, I have to stop this. Like, I have to break this curse that we're in, and I don't want to repeat those cycles for my daughter. And although that it was a hard thing that I went through, but I used that as fuel to become a better mom, to become a better woman. And through that, through that eyes of feeling that way, because I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is supposed to be a joyful time for me, but I was also healing too. So I'm like, I'm healing, supposed to be a good time for me. And here I am in this environment back here. And it almost felt like, I couldn't escape that place, mentally. I definitely could have left, but I escaped that place. But that was supposed to be my home, and that was supposed to be my mom. And I was like, I didn't understand all those dynamics, why that happened. So after I left, I remember just all these thoughts that were going on in my head. And I think back at that moment, that was the turning page for me and my story with my kids, that actually had the chance to do it different. It was not a question for me. It was like, I'm going to love this little girl so much that she's going to be tired of it. And I'm going to support her with whatever decision that both of my daughters make in this life. I literally vowed to myself, I will never fight my daughters. I just could never imagine it be even getting to that point. I use that in a lot of different scenarios of my upbringing to parent in my new journey with my kids and my life with them. And so you do have a chance to break generational curses. You do have the chance. A lot of people, I feel like, think that they don't have the opportunity, but it actually starts with yourself and you talking to yourself and you becoming self-aware of situations and what would you do different. If you don't have kids, what would you do different? For me, that was the dynamic on breaking my generational curses with my daughters. I bet you they don't even know that they're the reason why I'm still here. That's truly how I feel about my daughters. Sometimes I feel like I also can be a little bit overbearing with them or too overprotective, which is something that I'm learning why, certain situations I'm like, oh, you can't, go here and go there. And by getting into therapy, I learned that those are some triggers of mine that I had to work with in therapy. So I can learn that I don't want to be too overbearing with them, but of course, still protection every day. That also is something you have to protect them from. And, or, certain family members that you have to protect them from witnessing things or seeing things that a child shouldn't see or, shouldn't be exposed to. And I feel like having my daughters were definitely a lifesaver for me. And all kids, actually, we all love our parents unconditionally, even if, through the good, the bad, and the ugly, we love our parents unconditionally. I love my mom unconditionally, but that doesn't mean that I'm not hurt, and that doesn't mean that I don't have a say-so on how I was raised. Also, when this whole thing did happen and I went back to tell my mom, I took a couple days and then I went back home and I told her how I felt. And this was kind of the first time that I actually voiced my opinion about something. No, I would never done that to my daughter. I would have never did this. And I use that moment as also a teachable moment. And so I use that as would you be okay if I ever did that to my daughter? And her response was, no, hell no. So why would you do that to me? And so that's where we start. We start with conversations and we start with self-awareness and we start with change. If you are that person who wants to be the change in your family, if you are that person who wants to be the voice in your family, you have to know that you have to change the dynamic. It has to be done to protect the future children, the future generation. Because I always say that, the saying, hurt people, and that is the cycle. And so if I did, continue that cycle of, abuse, of neglect, of, all the abuse that I experienced or endured, what would my kids be like today? They would probably be the same way I was. And I would be creating a whole different dynamic of, children that probably will go out into the world and do crazy things because they're hurt. And so use your story, use your pain, use your experiences that you felt that were done to you to break loose from those and break the cycle, and look at like where you are and where do you see the dynamic of your family, of your children's life. And that sometimes also comes with, getting away also from that family, from that spouse, from whatever you're in that dynamic of breaking the cycle, even choosing the wrong person or staying in the wrong, relationship or marriage or anything like that. You have to, break that cycle. When I look at it, I'm changing the entire story of my family. I'm changing the entire dynamic for my kids and their kids. That's how I think about it. Because I'm changing the story, because I developed the courage, because I have the strength, the entire family generation to come after me, I'm changing it for my daughters and their sons that I don't even know, ahead of me. And that right there is so beautiful that I can actually feel like my daughters will have so many great stories to tell about me and the strength that I had, and courage that they've seen me, and know that, hey, that was a strong woman. And then that makes them also strong and also stand in, hey, mom taught us this way, and how to love. And like I always remember, I just give my daughters, so many kisses and hugs. And I always tell them every single day that I love them, because I remember that was one thing that I was like, I don't remember ever being told I love you growing up. And or just, I'm pretty sure it was said sometimes, but I don't recall it. Like, seriously, I do not recall being told I love you. And I'm not the only one. Some of my siblings have said the same thing. So for me, that's like a everyday affirmation to my children, that I love you regardless, that I love you no matter what, that I love you through your good days, through your bad days, because I am human. And I know that because I'm human and I'm an adult, I have good days, I have bad days, and so do your children. And so if you're thinking in that way, just think for them and the generation to come after you. So I want to say thank you so much for listening to this, and comment down below or leave any notes that you feel like you've taken from this. Write down things that you've probably can do better as a mom, right? Or a dad. Write down things that you feel like you maybe also can change or talk about in your family. Write down things that you can also have discussions with your parents or people who've raised you, and have these open dialogues to also sometimes understand, where did these patterns come from? And also to get clarification that this cannot happen anymore. So I want to end with this, and thank you so much for listening to All Things Healing podcast, where you heal, I heal, and we all heal together. So again, thank you for listening to this episode. Bye.